So welcome to the Lovefly Podcast. And today's guest is Sharon, who has been waiting patiently to get on and share her story. And so we're delighted to welcome you. So hello, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me, Paul. I just can't thank you and your team enough for all the help you've given me. It's really changed my life, just like you've changed the lives of about 30,000 people so far and freeing us up to travel the world. So forever grateful to you and your team.
Well, thanks ever so much for coming. That was great. So that's great. We've got to the end already. So Sharon, tell us where you are and tell us a bit your story and, how you found us, and, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, sounds great. So I live in the U.S. near Boston, and I'm married and have a family, and they are my life and my happiness. And I would really love to be able to travel more with them and see the world. And I never refused to fly. I never cried. I never hyperventilated. I had a different approach, which was equally as bad, and that was to just try to hide my fear and suffer in silence. So that's what I've done for the past 30 years.
How's that working?
Not well at all. So I've always been interested in travel. I love travel guidebooks, travel shows, geography. I love boats. I even love airports. I just didn't like the feelings that I had on the plane itself. So that was what I had to solve. But unfortunately, for the past 30 years, rather than ever addressing it, I just blocked it out and suffered in silence, as I mentioned. I also did inherit the fear, so I know that was a strike against me. But I learned from you, Paul, that the fear is not innate. It is something learned. Yes. So it can be changed. The question was how to change it. So
I'll just ask you, so for the 30 years that you've been suffering in silence, you did fly, but you were you had to do like the big acting job.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I didn't want to put a damper on the trip for those I was flying with. And there was no way I was going to pass it on to my child, especially since it had been, passed on to me. So my approach was just to be the stand-in pilot, which I learned about from you. And once I heard you mention the stand-in pilot, I knew that Lovefly was the program for me, because that was my exact method of behavior that I wanted to change.
You were on duty for the whole flight, just in case.
Absolutely on duty. I wouldn't talk. I wouldn't eat or drink. I wouldn't watch a movie or read. I would just concentrate.
Oh my God.
And it was miserable and exhausting.
Yeah.
And
what were you like before the flights?
I was okay before the flights because I blocked it out and didn't think.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know a lot of your listeners have issues with anticipatory anxiety, but that wasn't me, because I just pretended it wasn't going to happen until I was literally at the airport, and then I would just suffer through the flight and not enjoy any parts of it. I wouldn't look out the window. I wouldn't, as I said, eat or drink or do anything except just concentrate.
So how did you know when to get scared?
I got scared when I was walking across the jet bridge. So the jet bridge was my main trigger, along with the cabin door closing. And my issues were claustrophobia, not wanting to give up the sense of control. And also, my whole life I have been motion sensitive. So that was my trifecta of misery, those three issues. And
okay, so that would be a trigger. So up until that point, you would just be in denial.
Right.
That would trigger you. And
yes.
Then what was it like for you? Tell us a bit more about what stand-in pilot meant for you.
Right. So stand-in pilot meant I couldn't relax because I had a job to do, and that was to keep the plane in the air. So by that, I would just be hyper alert to everything happening around me, always watching the cabin crew, listening to all the noises, feeling the different sensations, without the benefit of having Pete Higgins' checklist, which taught me now what all of those different stages of flight are. So it's really just a lack of knowledge, and it's really kind of surprising to me that I never addressed this sooner, because normally in my life, I solve things on my own, just with kind of just determination. I'll just quietly solve my problems. But I really literally didn't know how to address this fear. I thought I had the worst case of it, than anyone in the world. And I know you've said that all nervous flyers feel that way. I just thought this was me and this was something I was going to have to deal with. But at least I never refused to fly. I would go and I wouldn't like make myself physically sick or anything like that. I would just suffer through. And then when I would arrive at my destination, I would be so exhausted from what I had just done over the past couple of hours. At that point, I had only done domestic flights, which are only like a couple hours long for the most part. And they were infrequent anyway. Like every few years we'd go somewhere. So it wasn't a part of my daily life enough that I really, sought a solution. I just figured, I can deal with that. However,
just ask,
sure.
Sorry, because it's interesting when you do what you did. People love that, but it's quite nice to get a sense of what it was like. So you mentioned that you get the claustrophobia. And,
right.
What else? What sort of happened for you when you were on board the aircraft?
Well, part of it was my physiology, which was extremely tense. I would just sit so rigidly, which also probably made the motion worse. And I would just sit very tensely, just hyper vigilant to everything happening. And again, just the lack of knowledge of what was happening and not wanting to give up the control because frankly, at the time, not trusting the pilots, which now I realize was such a mistake because I've learned so much with the technical information from Captain Steve and others about how often they're tested in the simulators every 6 months. They're ready for every possible emergency situation. I have such tremendous respect for the profession, and I'm just so sorry for what I put myself through and that my brain thought that flying was a threat. When if I had all of this knowledge about the professionalism of the pilots, of the cabin crew, of the flight planners, I just didn't have any of that knowledge. Well, so my brain thought it was a threat.
Okay. You'll forgive your brain,
pardon?
Right? Forgive your brain.
That's right.
You still did your stuff, and so maybe you weren't flying comfortably, and you weren't flying too often.
That's right.
But so what was the turning point that made you think, enough is enough?
Well, we had a trip planned to Ireland for May of 2020. So that was going to be my first trip to Europe. And also I would have to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, which, again, not having the knowledge seemed like a really big hurdle for me.
Sure. Yeah.
So, plus the fact that I really did want to start traveling more after the pandemic and everything and just reaching a different stage of my life now. I still work full time, but I have enough vacation time that I can take one big trip a year and a couple of little smaller trips. Nice. So I just wanted to get past this and to be able to see parts of the world I've never seen. As I mentioned, I've never been to Europe, which is hard to believe. So
May
so
2020,
we had that.
So obviously the pandemic, that scuppered your flight anyway.
Exactly. Yes. So we had
tickets. Were you secretly relieved?
Yes, I sure was. I sure was. We had the tickets and everything all planned. As I mentioned, I had never been to Europe. I had a passport with no stamps. My parents also had never been to Europe. So it just somehow seemed like maybe I would never get there. And then the pandemic happened and the trip was canceled. And then I thought, well, I never thought I could get there. And I guess this proves it.
This is a sign.
Exactly. I guess it's just not meant to be. So
why Ireland? What was the pull to Ireland?
Well, that's where all of my ancestors, except for one, I have one German ancestor. Everyone else was from Ireland on both sides of the family. So my father had been a really proud Irish American, and so I was just raised, having a real appreciation for the culture there and in the country. So it was really a lifelong dream, to be able to go. So
it's an important trip then. So
it was
May 2020, pandemic happened. Right. Never mind. Then what? So then what happened?
So then I really didn't think much about flying on, to be honest with you, for the next 3 years. I was just busy living my life. But then my family said, oh, so when are we going to go to Ireland? Now that the world's opened back up again. So here it was, back on my horizon again. So I knew that I needed a plan. I really knew that I needed help. I'm usually a pretty reasonable person, and I thought, I don't want to live like this anymore.
Yeah.
So I typed fear of flying into Spotify, and up popped your blue and white modern logo. That looked cool. And then I saw your friendly face, Paul, and I thought, well, this looks interesting. Let's give this a listen. And so I just started with the current episode, which was episode 124 with Dasha. She said she was born in Poland and working in the UK as a teacher, if you remember her.
Yeah.
And once I heard Dasha speaking from the heart, I thought, well, now I'm no longer alone with this. Now I'm hearing somebody else, with similar struggles. And I just felt like this was a real turning point for me. That one day I just thought, okay, I'm going to continue with this now. And I looked at the Lovefly website and liked the information I was seeing on there and found out about the audiobook. And I have to say that the audiobook was the biggest game changer for me.
All right.
And because, oh, you're so welcome. As soon as you said that you absolutely know that we could beat this fear and that there's actually nothing wrong with us, we just had some unhelpful thought patterns, I thought, you're kidding. That's all it is. So I thought,
did you feel like cheated at that point, did you?
It was that simple? Right. Why have I suffered for 30 years? So you just said that, we needed to change our thought pattern. So at least that defined the problem and what I needed to do. But of course, the $1 million question was, well, how do you change your thoughts if you're not really actively creating them anyway? They just kind of pop into your head. It's not like I'm thinking, okay, I really want to wake up today and be nervous to fly. It just occurs. It's just there. So if I'm not actively doing it, how do I change it?
Yeah.
And so the answer for me anyway was, drum roll, please.
All right, so hang on.
Total immersion. Or as your podcast guest, Michael, he said, inundation. He said he inundates himself with the information before he has to fly. And that is what I did because, as I mentioned to you one time, Paul, I said I pictured it like a sci-fi movie. Like I had to remove the cartridge of faulty data out of my head and put in the cartridge of facts, knowledge, and current data. And it's so weird, and I didn't even know if this could be a thing, but it's like all of my thoughts and feelings that I had previously about flying really have gotten replaced. So I did that through...
Hang on a second. How did you do that? That sounds a bit weird.
Total immersion. So I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit here.
Yeah, please do.
So for the first month after finding Lovefly, I listened to all podcasts featuring Captain Steve, Sarah Fowler, Pete Higgins, and other aviation experts and mental health professionals.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to all of those first, plus the audiobook on repeat, which is only like 2 hours long. So that was very doable. And again, the audiobook gave me hope. So that was the best part about it. And then 1 month later, I purchased the 30-day program. So for listeners who may not be familiar, you receive an email every day from Paul and his team with 5 to 10 minute video clips. It would hit my inbox here in the evening time. So as soon as my email would arrive, I'd say, oh, there's Lovefly. And it felt like hearing from a friend. It's like I wanted to receive those videos because the content was delivered in a lighthearted way, in a friendly way. It never felt like, rote knowledge or textbook knowledge. It just felt entertaining, frankly. And I really loved learning about it. And so I was
So Sharon, can I just ask you, because we're redoing the 30 day at the moment. Me, Susan, Steve and Sarah sort of redoing some more elements of it. And one of the things that I was wondering about was like, it sounds like you had a set time that you listened to it. Yeah. Was that helpful?
Yes. I listened to it almost every day, right when it arrived in the evening, because it was a good time, like after dinner, to tune in with that. If I was ever busy or tired, I would listen to it the next morning. And so I did want to mention that to your listeners too. Don't feel like if you miss a day, you're done for, because you could just double up the next day.
Okay.
But most of the time I did know what was coming, expected it to be coming, and did enjoy listening to it on that evening.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, yes. No problem at all. And then a couple of weeks after finishing the 30-day program, then I purchased the half-day webinar.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you. I thought I'd seen you on that. I think I sort of thought I'd seen your name from twice. That makes sense now.
Yes, right. Well, I really, by that time, honestly, that was mid-July after having started this whole process in late April. In mid-July, I bought the half-day webinar. And that was really more just to kind of solidify everything, reinforce everything, to see your team on video. I actually bought it because I was cleaning up after having a dinner party with family. And I just kind of wanted something to do to, make cleaning the kitchen better. So I thought, I've been wanting to get that webinar. So I did purchase the webinar, and then my family was getting kind of interested in it too. So that was really fun. And
I find that so funny, Sharon. That makes you laugh so much that you thought, how can I make this boring cleaning up the kitchen job? That is funny.
Exactly. Well, after getting to know you and your team and, trusting you and enjoying all the content, it felt like infotainment at this point, because I was already feeling so comfortable. And I just thought, I'll bring my friends from Lovefly along and help me get this job done. So it was great just to, again, just reinforce everything that I had been learning. And one thing I'm
glad we helped your kitchen cleaning. And to be honest, that's probably as much use as I'd be, because my attention to detail is not great. So I'm interested. So this period here, so you did some immersion, you did the 30-day program, you had and the half-day webinar. How long a time are we talking, time frame?
So I listened to Gasha on April 27th, and then for a whole month, I just listened to the Lovefly podcast featuring the experts, because frankly, I was a little bit afraid to dip my toe in with the nervous flyers, because I thought that they might give me something to be nervous about that I hadn't thought about. So that was my method at the time. As it turns out later, I needn't have worried, because I gained something from each and every guest.
Yeah.
So it's not necessary to do that, but that was at the time what I felt I needed to do. Okay, so for the first month, I just did the podcast and the audiobook. 1 month later, I did the 30-day program. So now we're at 2 months. And then 2 weeks after finishing the 30-day program, I bought the webinar. By this time, I was feeling ready to fly.
Wow.
So this was mid-July, and my flight was September 9th, but I was really raring to go. I was wishing it could even be sooner.
That's lovely. So can I ask you, Sharon, what sort of time commitment were you putting in? Because it sounds like you were proper going for it, and English phrase, proper going for it. And I'm just trying to get a sense of what the commitment was per day, because it sounds like you properly immersed yourself.
Yes, at least an hour a day. I would be listening. I really love audio personally, because it enables me to be doing dishes or laundry or driving. So it was at least an hour of audio per day, sometimes more. I actually don't listen to audio when I'm walking outside, because I'm a real nature lover and I want to hear the birds and the wind through the trees. So I don't listen when I'm outside, but when I'm inside,
when you're doing things like, like cleaning the kitchen and stuff like that.
That's right. That's right. So I really started feeling a lot better after a couple of months. And then like 3 months later, I was raring to go. Oh, and I should mention my scores, because you have that pre-test on the 30-day program, the fear assessment.
Yeah.
And I had scored a 35 on the pre-test. And that said, on the cusp of letting the fear control you. And then a couple of months later, I scored an 8, which was within the normal range.
Yeah.
And then I took it last week, actually, just because I knew I'd be talking with you today, and I scored a 3. So that was just, like I said, I don't know where that old information from my brain, which wasn't information, it was disinformation, and I don't know where that went, but it's been replaced. And I listened to your podcasts every week, the new ones that come out. I still listen to the audiobook occasionally. So I'm really just trying to keep the momentum going. So in addition to the trip to Ireland, I also went on a quick little trip down to Florida, just a 2.5-hour flight.
Whoa. This is nice. So tell us then, I love the fact you said you couldn't wait for the flight to come round.
That's right.
These scores dropping, which is great. So the thing I'm interested in is like, well, how was the flight? What was really up to it? What was the jetway like for you? Because that was a trigger.
Exactly. Yes. I'll tell you all about that.
Have I jumped ahead? Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. So we just get back to my area here. All right. You know what? I have this in my notes. So let me just grab that. All right. So I was going large because I was meeting my daughter and her fiance over there. My husband actually wasn't coming on this trip. So his job was to take me to the airport, when he's always so great about that. I arrived early at Boston at Logan Airport. And I really loved being in the environment, just strolling around. I hadn't flown in 12 years. I don't think I mentioned that. Between the pandemic and just working, raising a family, it had been quite a long time since I'd been on a flight. But here I was going by myself on a transatlantic night flight. So imagine this. But I had my little Aer Lingus plane here that I bought, and this was on my bedside table. I know Captain Steve has his larger Virgin Atlantic plane. So I had this on my bedside table as I was going through all the training and just reminding myself, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And so I loved watching out the window. I loved seeing the planes coming and going. And then closer to my actual takeoff time, I could see the pilots from my plane. I could see them like through their windshield communicating, as I had watched many, many times on YouTube, watching the cockpit videos, which I highly recommend because that was part of my coursework, as I call it.
Oh, yes. Can I ask you, so anything that particularly good ones that you found? Because it's quite nice to do a shout out.
Sure. Well, especially since I was flying Aer Lingus, I liked watching those videos. And I have a hero named Fiona, who was one of the pilots, and I watched all of her videos on repeat. And my family would see those, and they would get kind of, interested in it too. So we were doing some of this together. So yes, highly recommend that. And just hearing how professionally the pilots speak with one another and how they're planning everything out. I was interested to see they still use like some paper for certain things, like they had like the paper maps of the runways and things. That was interesting. I guess I just thought everything would be computerized.
Yeah.
But of course,
it's quite else, isn't it, to think that you've got all those sort of backup systems in place. And so you would think, oh, yeah, it's just all going to be on an iPad now. But you do obviously have that end, but they also have the maps, the books, and everything, because just to make sure it's belt and braces, as we say,
Absolutely. And I've learned from you, Paul, how there's no single point of failure with anything. So they have all those different backup systems, computers, paper, everything that they could need.
Okay.
So, all right.
Keep going. Yeah.
Yeah. So then it's time for the jet bridge, which, of course, in the past had been a real trigger for me. But I learned from you about using your physiology to your benefit. How would a comfortable passenger walk, sit, stand? I learned about all of that. Only in this case, I didn't have to act because I really actually was feeling comfortable, but I still had it in my mind. And so as I walked down the jet bridge, I was smiling, which probably looked a little weird since I was by myself. And then I was looking so forward to seeing the cabin crew and, smiled and greeted them, sat down in my seat. And I remembered what you said about having your area clear. Mm-hmm. And so I just had a few small items in my bag for the trip. And then, so here comes the cabin door closing. And I remember in the audiobook when you would say, "Oh no, let me out of here." And you'd say, "Maybe I could just fling the door open." And again, you just had a lot of humor and you told it like it was. And that was how I used to feel. Now I was ready for the cabin door to close, and I made a point to smile when it closed, just so that was my physiology. And plus, I was ready to go. My gosh, I was ready. So
I love that.
I smiled.
That one is smiling at the door.
They probably thought I was a real weirdo. And I said, this is a good thing, in my head.
Yeah.
And then on takeoff, I was waiting for like a roller coaster feeling because, as I mentioned, I've always been like a little bit motion sensitive. Like I was the kid in the back seat, car sick my whole life. But I have these little acupressure wristbands.
Oh, yeah.
And they're called C-bands, SEA, like for seasickness. And they're only $10. And it's supposed to interrupt the signal from your stomach to your brain saying, oh, time to get nauseous. So I wore these, and actually my seatmate asked me about them too, a young woman, and she wasn't even just stopping in Dublin. She was going on to Scotland from there. Anyway, so at first I felt like it's kind of weird to wear these, and then my seatmate, who's a young woman, was interested, so that was good. And I waited for that roller coaster feeling, which really never came. I mean, I was on an Airbus 330, which is the largest plane I've ever been on, and it was just a nice, smooth ride. I had Pete's handy checklist with me. If anyone's not familiar with that, Pete Higgins has a genius flight checklist taking you all through the stages of flight. I had that in my little bag of the few necessities I needed. I actually didn't need to open this and refer to it because I had read it so many times. I was very familiar with it. And by the way, on the last podcast, you mentioned you're going to do an audio version of it.
Yeah, Pete's doing that now. He's been really looking into it to make sure that it's, because of the way he is, he's so thorough. And he's been going around. He's been around to schools where they are partially sighted or are visually impaired, and talking to people at the airport. So he's not just doing it; he's doing it properly. Because I just thought he'd jump on and read it out. No, not Pete.
Well, that's fantastic, and it would be so special to hear it in his voice because he's been a big part of my journey.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pete Higgins, I should mention that I listened to his episode on takeoff. So I had a bunch of Lovefly content downloaded in case I needed it, but I actually didn't need to cram because I had been preparing for so long and I was ready. But I did want to listen to Pete because of his joy and exuberance and humor for flying. So I did choose to listen to that. And I just want to get the correct episode here if I can. Well, I may not be able to.
You are fast becoming or appearing one of the most researched guests ever. You've got, exactly the episode numbers. You've listed them all off. When. I mean, April 27th, you listened to Gossia. I mean, just the fact that you've got that down. Wow.
I guess it just kind of comes naturally because I'm a librarian. So I like facts and I like notes. I guess I can't help that part. But anyway, the episode that I listened to with Pete Higgins was when he's talking about accompanying a nervous flyer. And the poor woman had suffered that day during the training, and she was crying a lot, and she wasn't able to partake in the activities. So, but she did go on the flight at the end of the day. So she was in the air with Pete, and it was like 9 p.m. And Pete was saying to the woman, "Oh, goodness, I hope we're not going to be up here all night because I have to get to Tesco." And then she said, why do you need to go to Tesco? And he said, "I have to get some cat food before they close at 10 p.m. He said, "I have 2 Russian blues. Have you ever been ignored by a cat? It's not very nice." So I just thought that was hilarious. Talk about normalizing something, talking about going to the grocery store for cat food. So I just find Pete such a delight and such a treasure. So that's what I chose to listen to on takeoff.
He'll be pleased to hear that because that's just, he's brilliant. He is absolutely.
He's amazing. Really an amazing, caring person. And I love hearing all of his travels with his partner around the world. I mean, what a huge body of work he's had with all those flights and all the people he's helped. So then after takeoff with Pete, then I noticed that my seatmate was watching Harry Potter. And I thought, that's a great idea. I love that movie and it's a long movie. So I just sat back and for the first time probably ever watched the movie. Oh, and Aer Lingus offers a lot of food and beverage and snacks. Like every time you turn around, they have something else they're offering you. And I ate and drank everything on the flight. I got up, walked around like you mentioned to do. Basically, I was a different person.
This is just remarkable, isn't it? And in the total time that you'd say that you were able to also, bear in mind you had 30 years of hating it. You hadn't been on a flight for 12 years.
That's right.
And this is the first time you've done transatlantic to Europe.
That's right.
All of these are fantastic. So what was the actual time span from start to finish, would you say?
From finding you to that first flight was 4.5 months.
Wow. It just goes to show what's possible, doesn't it? But also it reinforces the point that it takes a bit of time, and you totally immersed yourself, and you chipped away at the fear, and amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. It's really all thanks to you and the amazing team of people that you put together, because learning so much from Captain Steve, he just put me right at ease. And he also has a similar personality to you, just a down-to-earth, caring person who also likes to use a lot of humor.
The illusion. Fantastic.
We're just normal people here looking for some help. So if this had been presented in a very, just black and white, matter-of-fact way, we wouldn't be motivated. But when we're learning from people who we can relate to, who we can have fun with and enjoy it, and people who give us some hope, that's what works. That's like the magic sauce. You've been kind enough to introduce some other fear flying programs on your program. They sounded awesome. I looked into them. I thought about doing, both programs at the same time. But in the end, I decided, Lovefly is my vibe. And I'm just going to keep this simple and just concentrate on one thing and just, as I say, immerse myself in it, which is what I did.
Oh, what a success story you are. And I think the bit there's lots of bits that I like about that, but the fact that, the material's out there anyway, so what we, Susan, John and I, we're the sort of the founders of Lovefly. When we meet up, we always kind of go, what are we about? We wrestle with this idea, but, essentially at the moment, it's like, well, actually, there's so much stuff out there. It's just we're trying to keep it in one place so that you don't have to look around for it. And a lot of people just have got over their fears. It's just the podcast alone, but it's nice if they need a bit of extra help like you did, go and do research today. But you are great proof of the fact you just got to keep chipping away at it and have the right sort of attitude. And you had a great goal to work towards as well, didn't you? So by going to see your roots.
That's right. That's right. Thanks so much for that, Paul. And the 30-day program is a great way to kind of help us chip away at it, because it gives us some structure. Anything we do in addition to that is great, but at least we know for 30 days straight, we're chipping away at the fear, as you like to say.
Yeah.
And I wanted to reference one of the podcast episodes with Dr. Paul Barber. That was episode 82. And he said that you should talk about your fear with your nearest and dearest, unlike what I was doing, which was trying to hide it. And in the end, did we really hide anything from our family anyway? They must have noticed, well, Sharon's not talking or laughing or eating anything. So I don't really know how well we hide our fear. But anyway, he said something so interesting, that if you don't talk about a fear, that you give it more energy. And he said that you hide it somewhere to grow all by itself, which really I feel was what I was allowing it to do by not bringing it into the daylight, which I have streaming through at the moment here. He said that, fear is an energy, but it doesn't really exist. Fear is a fantasy, and we're haunting ourselves. So that episode really, really struck me. Like I said, the combination of aviation experts, the mental health experts, plus nervous flyers. Just that combination is what really hits home.
No, that's lovely. So thank you. You've said some very nice things and stuff. And it's, the end of the day, you've done the work. So there's a lot, whilst the stuff's there, some people will say, I've tried this, I've tried that. But it's like, well, you've got to do what you've done, which is just stick at it and just keep going, even if you think sometimes you might have a blip, or you might think, why am I, I want it. people want instant results, don't they? But as you've proved, it took a good couple of months for you to change your mindset, and that's normal. That's very impressive. So, Sharon, I always wrap up with sort of Sharon's top tips. Now, as a librarian, now you set the bar, so we're expecting it to be indexed correctly, maybe in alphabetical order. So let's.
Okay, that sounds good. May I just mention a few helpful episodes?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Okay, great. So episode 85 with Captain Steve is one of my favorites, and I've listened to that many times.
What about then?
That's when he talks about that the people up at the front, meaning the pilots, that they have lives and families, that this is their career. And this particular line where he said, this is not some big experiment that's going on this particular day to get you on your holidays, because frankly, to someone who doesn't fly very often, it feels like an experiment. Before you learn all of the safety data and everything, it does feel like an experiment. So for him to address that and say that it's not, that really normalized flying. And he said this is just their office, and they've chosen a career that's the safest form of transport, bar none.
Okay, thank you.
Episode 69, of course, is the audio book. So that's an easy way to access it and listen to that on repeat. Oh, episode 117, Ian from Flight Radar 24. I loved hearing that one. And of course, I downloaded Flight Radar 24. And I've looked at it so much now, I have pretty much like the flights memorized, like the 6 a.m. flights over my house. They're going to Washington, D.C., then they're going to Philly. So, and when we like go hiking, and sometimes I'll pop it on with my family and I say, hey, they're going to such and such. And my family's probably thinking, we don't care, Sharon. but they don't say that.
Nervous version. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, and of course, the Just Planes channel I already mentioned on YouTube. One of my biggest breakthroughs was with episode 41, Jeff Rolls, the master NLP trainer. You had already introduced this concept with your 5 pillars that I learned about, but he said, fear of flying is a feeling that people generate themselves. Since they're doing it, they can learn to stop doing it and start doing something else in its place. That was just so amazing to hear, because again, it just like defines what the issue is and gives you hope that it can be changed. In the audiobook, you said that at the root of the fear is the belief that you will die in some horrible fashion. And I thought, well, I don't actually think I'm going to die. So if I'm not afraid to die, I'm really not afraid of anything. So then I learned all the technical info, which we don't have time to go all through that, but listeners, just believe me, if you learn the technical info from Lovefly, which is presented in a very understandable way, it's going to take away a big chunk of your fear. Okay. So, could I just mention I mentioned my Dublin flight, and then I took a quick trip to Florida last month, and get this. So, we took off at 7:15 a.m. I was noticing all of the beautiful scenery. It seemed like we were flying kind of low because I could really see everything so well. And then 5 minutes into the flight, the captain said, he announced that there was some engine vibration, so we would be returning to the airport. So the old me would have, freaked out a little bit. Thinking, exactly. Oh, my gosh. But the new me was like, oh, goodness, I'm supposed to meet my family down at the pool at 1 o'clock. I don't want to be late for the pool. I was only worried about swimming and having fun. I wasn't worried about the mechanical issue. Why?
That is the moment, isn't it? When that's what you then start to worry about, not being at the swimming pool in time.
Exactly. We took off 2 hours later on the same plane with no worries on my part, because I trusted everybody to do their job. The engineers will do their job. The captains aren't going to fly if it's not safe. On the way back from that trip, we had a hard landing, and the seatmate next to me grabbed the seat in front of her. And I thought, a hard landing is a good landing. So, all right. So you asked me for my top tips. I have them ready here. There's only 3. I feel like I've gone.
You've done loads of. You have done loads of tips. I was just going to we did skip past the technical stuff, but I don't want to say, if there was a particular couple of episodes that or something like technical that you thought this message was very helpful. Then, because you've prepared so well, I don't want to sort of not have. So there's been some really great bits. And before we go to your kind of 3 top tips, is there anything that I made you skip over?
Oh, sure. Well, I found it very comforting to know, first of all, that there's flight planners, because I had never even heard of that as a profession. So you said, the flight planners are planning your flight and every flight that goes off. So if you're just starting from a place of zero knowledge about commercial aviation, except what you're unlucky enough to hear about in the media, which often isn't accurate, any technical information that you learn is going to be helpful. But learning about the flight planners and the pre-flight checks, where the pilots are going over the systems and routes, their takeoff plan, no single point of failure, multiple backup systems. So thrilled to learn about the human factors training, where you said that the pilots don't touch any gear or equipment without first saying it out loud, and the other pilot saying check, check, check. So no errors can be made that way. Of course, Captain Steve teaching us about the simulator training every 6 months, and that he was even a trainer for that. He's so reassuring to hear from. And then you said that if there's going to be a medical emergency, an airplane is a good place to have one, because of all of the training for the crew, and the fact that they're in touch with organizations on the ground like MedLink, and that the medical data can even be like transferred down there on the ground. That was so important to learn. This one helped me get across the Atlantic, when you said that pilots always at all times know where the nearest suitable airports and runways are. So then I thought, okay. And they also have more than enough fuel to get there. Yeah. I had always just thought they'd fly like just straight as the crow flies, but turns out they, go toward land along, like from Boston up along Canada. So they want to be, near those airfields wherever possible. So that got me over my issues flying across the Atlantic. Oh, and the fact that extreme turbulence, Captain Steve has only seen it like 5 or 6 times in his life, was very comforting.
Yes.
I have my boards here because I'm a big boogie boarder, and I have my surfboard here because my whole life I've loved being out in the ocean, being on the waves. And so, I love when there's movement in the water with the waves. So what's the difference really between that and the movement in the air? Same thing. It's all nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Planes can fly with one engine and glide with no engines. And then we already talked about the stages of flight with Pete Higgins. Everyone needs to download that.
Remember what episode that was? I can't remember that. I can never remember them.
I'm not exactly sure. I just I have a checklist here.
Yeah.
I was so glad that you mentioned what a go-around is, because I had never heard of that. Maybe it's called like a missed approach or something in the U.S. I don't know.
I think they used to call it an aborted landing. Right. Which was like, so that language is sometimes knocking around. Yeah, missed approach.
Right.
Pilots were unthinking pilots, which is like, like if they don't think about the audience, will say, yeah, we threw away the landing.
Oh my goodness.
When the fly, you think, oh, what's that mean?
That's kind of like hitting turbulence, right? Exactly. Yeah, it's all about the way you say things sometimes.
Yeah.
So
that's good. Thank you for those.
Oh, you're so welcome. So are you ready for my top tips?
We want the top tip. I mean, it's been filled with tips, so these are the good.
Well, I feel like I've really just kind of regurgitated back everything I've learned from Lovefly, so I don't know how new it was for you, but so my top tip number 1 is to watch cockpit videos on Just Planes on YouTube, and you can hear how calmly the pilots communicate. Just another day at the office, but do not click on anything suggested as videos unless it's from Just Planes. I already mentioned the acupressure wristbands. If you are motion sensitive, that's tip number 2. And then tip number 3 is the most important, which is to commit to a fear of flying program and immerse yourself in the content. And of course, for me, that program was Lovefly. If you want to fly comfortably with no alcohol or medication, just follow the Lovefly program. Stop searching for an answer, because this is your answer. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you want to get to the other side of this fear, just immerse yourself in the program and let your rational brain take over.
Perfect. We're going to, I mean, I don't know if you work in sales as well, but this is like our sales promotion. That was just brilliant. Very humbling to hear all that. And I mean, I still say, you know, the material's there. People have to have that motivation and tenacity, which you've showed to see it through. And that's what you've been doing. And so you're working proof, you know, you're proof of the results of, you know, working through the fear, which is just amazing.
Well, thank you so much for that, Paul. And I would just recommend to your listeners, if they did want to purchase the 30-day program or the half-day webinar, to just look at it like a travel expense. You know, you pay to book your particular seat, check a bag, just click on those Lovefly programs for such a ridiculously low price. It's like $62 US dollars. I mean, that's crazy. That's like less than checking a bag. So just picture that as part of your travel expenses and enjoy all of the beautiful world out there that you can travel to with your family and friends with no drama.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, that's a very nice way to think about it, because there is the price to check a bag in, isn't it? And
that's right.
And it's so expensive now to do all that. So I hadn't thought about it like that. But that's quite a nice link, that. Yeah. Ooh.
Well, thank you, Paul. And I also just wanted to...
That's a great little hook, that is. Thank you.
Yes, please use it. And I wanted to wish all of your nervous flyers well. In mid-April, I know you're doing the in-person training, and I actually don't need to wish them luck, because they don't need luck. They can do it if they just commit to the program. So I wish them well and many years of happy flights.
Sharon, thank you so much. What a lovely episode. And so I really appreciate the effort you put into sort of thinking about what you're going to talk about. And you could tell how prepared you were, because you've got all your notes come out, and I don't feel like you've missed out any of the goods that obviously helped you. And this is going to be a really, really positive and encouraging episode for people, and also packed full of useful tips. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks to you and your team for everything and for improving my life and thousands of others.
I'll have to stop there. Don't get any better than that.
Thank you, Paul.